Hello. Previously, we created the form for the user to conduct a transaction. Now, this is updating the state of the conduct transaction component. But we still need a button and a way to hook up the API request to post the user entered transaction data to the backend. So in the conduct transaction component, let's have a new method called conduct transaction. This is going to be a class property that is set to a callback function. All right. First, we'll access the recipient and amount value from the state. So let's grab the recipient and the amount using JavaScript destructuring syntax from this .state. Cool. Then we're ready to make the API request. We're going to make a fetch request to the backend at http://localhost:3000/API/transact. Since this is a post request and not a default GET request, we're going to need to add a little more configuration. We can specify this in the second argument of the fetch method, which takes an object with special configuration. First, that object is going to have a method key, which is going to be set to a string value of post. Then we provide some headers for the request to specify what kind of information we're sending in this post request. And in this case, we need an object with a key of content type. Notice that the key has a dash within it. So for valid JavaScript syntax, this key needs to be surrounded by single quotes. The value for this is application/JSON. Okay, and the body itself can be an object that is the recipient and the amount. There's one catch to this though. In HTTP, only stringified data can be sent over the wire. So we're going to call json.stringify over the object that consists of the recipient and the amount. Nice. Now we can follow up with the fetch in the same manner as our other requests. We chain a .then handler since the fetch returns a promise, and this takes a callback function. In this case, this callback has a parameter of response to get the response object from the fetch method, and this has an inner JSON method which also returns a promise, which leads us to another .then handler, which in this case gives us the JSON. And the result of this is that we want to have a pop-up for the user that'll either contain the json.message or the json.type. So the return value in the backend is that either there's a message field from the backend when it's an error case, but when it's a success case, we don't have a message field, but we do have the json.type, which will be success. So in the success case, message will be undefined, therefore we'll go to the OR case and then alert the json.type. All right. Now we can actually call this conduct transaction within a new button component within our class. So let's import the button component from React Bootstrap in addition to the form group and the form control. And now in the render method, we can also get rid of this console.log of this.state. After our form group now, let's have a div that contains our button JSX. As a text, this will say submit. Let's also match the theme of the application by making this button style danger through the BS style prop. I'll also inline the props so that way the JSX is nicely aligned. And the most crucial thing is that on a click, this will fire the this.conduct transaction that we now have set up. Make sure to have the button JSX. On a click of this, this will fire conduct transaction, which will destructure the recipient and amount from state, and then post that in an object to the backend API transact post request, which will either alert in a json.message if it's an error, or the json.type if it's a success. All right, then go ahead and open up the application in the browser. Give it a refresh. For the recipient, you can do foo address, and for the value, how about 50? Let's go ahead and submit this. And we get localhost 3000 saying, well, we got a success. Cool. So that is nice to see. But it's hard to tell if our actual conduct transaction post request actually had an effect. But we can manually check this by going to localhost 3000/API/transaction pool map. And this should tell us if there is indeed a new transaction within the transaction pool. And looks like there is a transaction in the transaction pool with the foo address of 50 that we just configured through the UI. Awesome. So this is quite reassuring. Our new API transact post request is functioning properly through the front end. But we can expect the user to make this GET request to the transaction pool map manually to confirm that their transaction went through every single time. As the next piece to this front end, we're going to create a component that has a constant view of the current transaction pool. That way, when this request to make a transaction succeeds, we can navigate the user to the transaction pool page. Then they can confirm whether or not their transaction indeed went through. Okay, let's hook that up next.